Good morning. We're reading from Esther chapter 5, verses 1 through 8. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you." "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "that the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Well, bring Haman at once," the king said, so that we may do what Esther asked. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking grape juice, the king again asked Esther, "Now what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question."
I like it when we can add a little humor to the reading. So, have you ever knew you were supposed to do something, and it was the right thing to do, but you were so afraid to do it that it almost stopped you from doing something? I mean, that could be a very general question. That could be, it seems very general coming out of my mouth, but there are times in our life where we know what the right thing is, but sometimes it's very, very hard to do it. And I can tell you, I have done that many a time. As a pastor, as a husband, as a father, I knew exactly what needed to be done, but the easy answer would just, don't worry about it. This book, we're in the book of Esther, and we're in this series, Heroes of the Old Testament. We've talked about all kinds of people from the Old Testament, and I will not go through every single one of them one by one, although I could if you wanted me to, but I think I'll just spare you for now. So if you've been here, you've noticed that there has been somewhat of a theme. That in all of these interactions and all of these heroes that we lift up and say, "Hey, you did a great job." Number one of the things I actually haven't really talked about much is the fact that all of these people were used by God and they were imperfect. So we often think about these people that are used by God, do mighty things, of being these perfect people who never did anything wrong. But we see that is not the case at all when we look at Moses. Abraham messed up. Gideon had some doubts. We look at all of these people, we see these common themes. So number one, they're imperfect. Number two is that God assured them that He will be with them. Every single one. Esther is a unique story. Because I want to caution you, and by saying, "Let me finish," okay? Because I'm going to get some weird looks, I think, whenever I reveal to you the first little tidbit of Esther. First of all, the book of Esther is unique in the Bible because never once does it mention God. Isn't that interesting? Let me finish. The author of Esther uses a very unique literary device that is used a few times in Scripture, but in this one it's used to the fullest of its capacity. And that literary structure is that it shows you a story, and it wants you, not the book itself, it wants you as the reader to find where God was active. So it's very, very unique in how it was written. It gets you to that point where you're almost frustrated, like, well, you mentioned God already. Like, we know that He's right there. We know that He's doing this stuff. And I get frustrated reading it because, like, would you just say it? But that is exactly what the author wanted us to do. The author wanted us to be frustrated to the point where we know that God was a part of this. Why don't you just say it? There are many times where even Jesus uses this very literary device himself when speaking. That it was just a part of the Jewish culture that they just wouldn't come out and just directly say it. They would say it in another way. So in the book of Esther, we see this interesting story. It starts out King Xerxes, this guy who was absolutely controlled by his impulse. He led Persia. The Persian Empire at this time was just very, very powerful. And they were known for not only conquering other nations, but brutally. So I know that we've talked a lot about other kings and conquering, but often what we would see whenever another king would conquer, they would take the people as slaves, and it wouldn't be as absolutely brutal and torturous as impaling and all those things that King Xerxes was known for. He was brutal. There was not a shred of mercy in this guy. He had a wife. Her name was Queen Vashti. Queen Vashti was a beautiful lady. And she was known throughout the kingdom as being the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. And of course, being the king, of course, that's his wife. One day, King Xerxes asked Queen Vashti, "Hey, would you come to this banquet?" He threw like a 6-month-long party. Could you imagine? And towards the end of this party, and it was all in honor of him and how great he was. I've never even had like a full week, But King Xerxes thought so much of himself that he decided to have this 6-month party. And at the end of this 6-month party, he asked his wife, "Would you, for the guests here in the castle or the palace or whatever, would you dance for them? Because you're just so beautiful. It'd be great entertainment to us if you would entertain it." Vashti said, "No, I'm not even going to come out of my room, in fact." And then instead of Xerxes sitting there, "Well, come on, would you just, come on, can we talk this out?" He said, "Okay, I'm going to get another queen." Okay? So he had some sort of a beauty pageant. And he wanted not only Vashti to see this and be jealous and just enraged, although she really wasn't. He says, "I want to gather up all those beautiful women in the kingdom and have them parade in front of me." This is getting weird, okay? And I'll choose the most beautiful one. He had this, and Esther rose to the top. She was easily the most beautiful, in his opinion, of the kingdom. But what he didn't know was that she was a Hebrew lady. And in those days, there have been so many exiles, and the Jewish people have been scattered all over the place. And then finally, in the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, Obadiah is around this time as well, we see that the Jews are coming back to Jerusalem, but some of them didn't. They just kind of stayed where they were. They were having a fine time. It was okay. In this area, in the area of Persia, there were a lot of Jews. Now, in this history, Jews were looked at very, very badly. They're kind of a drain on society. Why don't you go back home? All those kind of things. But they were kind of tolerated. King Xerxes gave his power to do whatever he wanted to do to his second-in-command, Haman. And Haman, and I'm very much condensing this story, or we would be here for hours. So Haman hated the Jews. With everything in him. So, one night where King Xerxes was celebrating a little too much with some grape juice, as Dale says, he tricked him into agreeing to whatever Haman decrees for the kingdom, it will be so. And it had to be so. So Haman says, "Okay, my decree then is to kill every single Jew." It's kind of sad. It's really sad. The fact that someone would have so much hate in their heart. Queen Esther heard about this, and she decided that she was going to approach the king directly. Like, hey, he loves me. He will do whatever I ask. I'm going to ask him not to do this. But the decree is the decree is the decree. So Queen Esther did something that no one was supposed to do, and she approached the king directly. You're not supposed to do that. You got to get an appointment, a lot of paperwork that needs to happen, all that kind of stuff. You just don't do that. That's like me walking straight up to the White House and saying, I want to speak to the president, I want to speak to him now. So, you just don't do that. Esther did, though, and somehow King Xerxes was in a great mood. And walked up and said, hey, let's throw a banquet. See where this is going? Let's throw a banquet. Let's get you in an even better mood, King Xerxes, and let me ask you for this one simple favor. King Xerxes said, okay. And Esther, throughout all this, fast forward, convinced him to not kill the Jews. Esther had this uncle named Mordecai who was going to be the first person that was executed by Haman. Didn't like him. But Mordecai, later on, saves King Xerxes' life. Before all of this was put into place, all of this was done, Mordecai, he got on the king's good side. Haman had already built a tall spike that Mordecai was going to be on. It's going to be his own little personal spike. He was going to execute him. Throughout all this, we realize that Haman, the one who hated so badly these Jewish people, had built this spike just for himself, actually. Throughout this whole story, we see that Esther, convinced King Xerxes, and Xerxes realized that Esther was Jewish later on, and he loved her, so he wanted to preserve her people, and Mordecai saved his life, so Mordecai was not going on that spike. In fact, it was going to be Haman that was put on the spike. We see that this evil feeling of just hatred had gotten Haman so incensed and so blinded by what the reality was that it was him who ended up being executed instead of Mordecai. Just a fascinating story. Esther is one on our list not because she did something miraculous, or not because she led this big army over to slay another army or anything like that, but because of her fearless nature, she was able to save an entire people group. You see this theme going on here? These people were destined for execution. It was written in the law. These people were, or Esther specifically, loved her people so much that she was willing to put herself on the line. Her reputation, her life. In those days, if you approached the king without being summoned specifically, or without being the entertainment, and if you just had the audacity to walk up and start talking to this guy, you were bound to death. That was the rules. How many times have we, like when I was asking, how many times have we known what the right thing is but have been afraid to do it? How many times have we approached God completely understanding that He can do anything but have stepped back because, well, maybe not this time? The author wants us to try to find God in it. This story we see woven in and out and in and out, and the entire theme of the story is God's provision for His people. God coming in to the rescue, like swooping in at the last moment. It also shows us that we could do everything in our power to show hate and discomfort and evil to someone, but just the natural byproduct of that is it coming right back on us, and we're the ones that are actually damaged. How many times have we just held this bitterness and contempt for maybe someone or a certain situation, and we have not let it go? And it has eaten us alive. We see that with Haman here. He was ready. Could you imagine? He was getting ready. He was putting his plan in place, how he was going to execute everyone. And he was saying, on this particular day, we are going to execute everyone. He made it known. Everyone knew that. And King Xerxes, instead of allowing him to do that, because you can't reverse a decree that had to happen, he armed all of the Jewish people in the kingdom. And he says, hey, on this particular day, here are the names of the people who were going to come execute you. I give you full permission to take them out beforehand. It's a weird story. So now we have a celebration. It's interesting. We have a Jewish celebration called Purim, which actually celebrates the Jews defending themselves. But the very anger, the distrust, the unforgiveness, the darkness of the heart led to this man's destruction. And we look at the opposite, we see the loving, fearless nature of Esther that saved an entire people group. I'm here to tell you today, and that was a lot of foundation for this, for a very simple thought. That if you trust in God, you can be fearless. The God that created the universe, the same one who spoke existence into existence, the same one who helped Abraham, and you looked up in the stars, how am I going to have all these children? God made it possible. The same one with Moses, I'm only one man standing in front of a fiery bush. I expect you, Moses, to help me take a people group out of a people group. The same one with Gideon. Hey, I'm just a little squirrely guy. What am I supposed to do? I'll be with you. With David, out of the pack, he was the smallest, he was the youngest, he was the weakest. He had some good agility. He could do some great stuff. God gave him the ability. We see so many times in Scripture that we often forget about that, maybe my situation is a little different, but time after time after time after time, God made the impossible possible through someone who was just willing and faithful. They didn't have special superpowers. They didn't wake up one day and they could shoot electricity out of their hands or something. I don't know. But it was just that simple, everyday life in which they just simply walked in line with what God wanted. They gave over their life to the Creator of the universe and said, whatever your will is, I'll make it happen. I don't have all the resources, I don't have all the abilities, I don't have the strength needed, but I tell you what, God, if God flows through us, in us, around us, beside us, we don't need to worry about that. And we see this so many times in Scripture where God is helping His people through someone who was, willing but had some doubts because of, they looked at their muscles and they looked at how many resources they had and all of those kind of things. But they wanted to please God. This story of Esther shows us this very thing. King Xerxes brought her into the court. And because of her love, because of her gentleness, because of her patience, whatever it was, she could have. Okay, so let's get in our own minds, right? If you were Queen Esther and or a part of the royal family, and the king says you can have whatever you want. I'm thinking about a Lamborghini, you know. I mean, obviously they didn't have maybe a chariot that was like a Lamborghini chariot or whatever, but you know, like something really nice, like a new home, half the kingdom. Give me gold. I want to swim in gold coins. You know, you can imagine what kind of thoughts that might go through your mind. But instead of that, she used this power to be able to show love to a people who were about to be completely wiped off the face of the earth. Well, in their kingdom. We see that she is fearless. We see that she is selfless. We see that she trusted. We see that God used her in amazing ways. She also, with being fearless, she put everything on the line. What good was it going to be? I can understand it from the other perspective.